People think revolutions begin with intelligence. Most of the time, they begin with an insult, one word, from one of the most powerful seats in this country, and within 48 hours, 100,000 people called themselves cockroaches, proudly, loudly, with a flag, an anthem, and a website. And somewhere in a room you'll never enter, someone is watching that number grow and smiling, not because they're afraid of you, but because you're doing exactly what they expected. May 15th, 2026. A Supreme Court hearing. The Chief Justice of India, not a politician, not a news anchor, not a WhatsApp forward, the highest judicial authority in this country looked at unemployed youth, at RTI activists, at social media commentators and said, there are youngsters like cockroaches, parasites of society. He later clarified, said it was misquoted, said he was targeting people with fake degrees, not India's youth broadly. But here's what nobody wants to say out loud. Even if the clarification is completely true, why did it land the way it did? Because it landed on something that was already there, a wound that was already open, a generation that has been financially exhausted, mentally exhausted, emotionally exhausted for years, being told to wait, to be patient, that the future is coming. The word cockroach didn't create the anger, it just finally gave it a name. Within hours, a party was born. Cockroach Janta Party, a website, a party anthem, 80,000 sign-ups, over 500,000 Instagram followers. Youth dressed as cockroaches cleaning the Yamuna riverbank. 2 sitting MPs reportedly joined. And it felt good. It felt like something finally cracked open. But I need to ask you something you don't want to hear. Why did it take an insult? Not unemployment. Not an education system that trains people to pass exams but never to think. The fact that India is the 6th largest economy in the world while its youth survives on salaries with no security, no safety net, and no future they can actually plan for. None of that built a 100,000-person movement. A word did, and that is exactly what the people in power already know about you. They have known it for decades. Your emotions are your on switch, and the most guaranteed way to gather a crowd has always been to trigger something that makes people feel seen in their pain. Now, I want to talk about something that nobody in this conversation is mentioning, because it's uncomfortable, because it implicates all of us. Research shows that young people today are spending close to 7 hours a day on screens, and a significant part of that is consuming crisis content, outrage, bad news, political disasters, viral injustice, in an endless loop. Studies have found that this doesn't make people more active. It does the opposite. It creates what researchers call existential anxiety, feelings of emptiness, helplessness, and loss of meaning. You keep scrolling to feel informed, but the more you scroll, the more anxious you become, and the more anxious you become, the more you scroll. It's not weakness, it's a designed loop. Gen Z researchers describe it as being wired but drained, overstimulated and exhausted at the same time, aware of everything, capable of acting on almost nothing, and here is where it gets brutal. Because the science is clear. When your brain is in that state of chronic emotional fatigue, you don't become more logical. You become more reactive. The part of your brain that processes emotion develops faster than the part that controls rational thinking. Which means, when you're already exhausted and then something humiliating happens, you don't evaluate it. You feel it. Immediately. Completely. One insult from a Chief Justice, one guy with a clever name, and 100,000 people move together in 48 hours. Not because they thought about it, because they felt it. There's a difference, and that difference is everything. Now let me tell you something about people that nobody wants to say openly. When you are in your darkest moment, when you are genuinely suffering, look around honestly at who actually shows up. 60% of people will look at your situation and quietly feel relieved they are not in your place. They'll watch your pain and think, "Thank God that's not me," and move on with their day. 70% will feel pity. They'll say something kind. They might even share your post. But pity changes nothing. Pity is just sadness, with no skin in the game. 20% will genuinely try to help, not because they have to, because they actually care. But here's the hardest part of all of this. Only you can fully and completely believe in yourself enough to fight for yourself. No movement will carry your urgency. No leader feels the weight of your specific life the way you do. Nobody else loses sleep over your problems the way you do. And that is exactly why movements that promise to carry your pain for you, movements that say, "Just follow us and things will change," should make you ask questions before they make you feel hope. Because here is the oldest trick in the entire history of power. Not violence, not censorship, not even outright lies. Bread and crumbs. Give people just enough hope, just enough small victories. A cleanliness drive here, a viral moment there, a symbolic win that feels real, a feeling of being heard. While the real problems, the ones that would actually shift power permanently, stay completely untouched. The broken education system stays broken. The unemployment numbers stay where they are. The corruption in institutions that decides who gets hired, who gets justice, who gets a loan, who gets a future, that stays invisible. But the crumb gets celebrated, and the people distributing the crumbs, they never go hungry. They sit in rooms you will never enter, deciding how much is just enough to keep people from demanding the full meal. This is not a new strategy. The East India Company didn't conquer this country through force alone. Not at first. They came with trade, with opportunity, with the language of partnership and mutual benefit. They identified every pain point, economic desperation, divided communities, regional conflicts, and made themselves look like the answer. And by the time people understood what was actually happening, the architecture of control was already built around them, inside them, so deep that many people helped maintain it without even realizing they were doing it. I'm not saying the Cockroach Janta Party is the East India Company. I am saying the method of entering through emotional need, through being exactly what a suffering group is desperately looking for, that method is ancient. And it works every single time, because we never remember it until it's too late. Now let's be honest about the system, because this part implicates everyone. The system doesn't need to silence people anymore. It doesn't need to ban voices or throw people in jail every time someone speaks up. It found something far more efficient: distraction. Every year, new content, new outrage, new genre of slop. The algorithm pushes directly into your brain before you've even fully woken up. A new injustice to feel, a new enemy to hate, a new movement to follow, a new reason to feel like you're awake and fighting, while nothing structurally changes. And here is what researchers found, and this should make you genuinely uncomfortable. Users who consume 4 or more hours of crisis content daily show increased psychological stress, sleep disruption, and most critically, decreased motivation to take real action. The more outrage you consume, the more numb you become to it. You stop feeling it as real. You start processing it as content. A rape case trends for 72 hours. You share it. You feel angry. You move on. The next thing arrives. The Epstein files dropped internationally. Millions watched. Nothing happened. Nobody arrested. not one powerful person held accountable. And you noticed that, and then you scrolled to the next thing. That is not your failure alone. That is a system that has learned how to metabolize your anger before it becomes action. The most dangerous manipulation is when people believe they are rebelling while behaving exactly the way the system expects them to: predictable, emotional, reactive, and above all, temporary. But here's where I stop pointing only outward, because this video would be dishonest if it didn't turn the mirror around. We waited for an insult to unite. We didn't build this voice when the education budget was cut quietly. We didn't build this voice when exam scams broke open. We didn't build this voice when every qualified young person in this country was told, apply again. Wait again. The job is coming. We built it when someone powerful called us a name that hurt our pride. And that tells the system exactly where to find us next time. Most of us also know this pattern. Deep down, we've seen it repeat. Someone comes, speaks fire, gathers followers, solves a small, visible problem, takes the credit loudly, and never touches the real ones. The ones that would actually shift power. The ones they will never touch. How many times will you change who to trust while the same cycle repeats underneath with different faces and different slogans? And how many of us saw the last movement, felt something stir, then got distracted by the next reel, the next controversy, the next outrage, and quietly returned to the exact same life the next morning? Awareness without action is just intellectual entertainment, and we have become very, very good at consuming truth and then putting it down. Here is one more thing about the system that needs to be said clearly. Power doesn't move for whispers. It never has. The system only responds when one of three things happens: when the voice gets loud enough that ignoring it becomes more costly than addressing it, when the people making decisions are personally suffering from the same problem, or when they calculate, this doesn't affect me, so I'll let it pass. That third one, that is the one that kills movements. Because most people, and this includes ordinary citizens, not just politicians, operate on exactly that calculation. Does this directly affect me right now? No? Then I'll pass. We scroll past the news about farmers. We scroll past unemployment data. We scroll past the court cases that will take years. We engage only when our own ego, our own identity, our own community gets touched. And that is why bread and crumbs work so well. Because a crumb that touches your specific pain in your specific moment feels like the full meal, even when the hunger is still completely there underneath. So, what do you actually do with this? You don't need me to list your problems. You live them. You know them more specifically than any reel, any party, any leader ever will. The question is whether you demand real answers, or whether you settle for the feeling of being heard. Because those are two completely different things. Ask your leaders, not online, not in comments, in public, on record. What specifically will you do? By when? Who holds you accountable if it doesn't happen? What will you do when the same system you're fighting extends a handshake and invites you inside? If they can't answer that calmly and specifically, or worse, if they get offended that you asked, you already have your answer, because they are public servants. That is the actual title, not public celebrities, not saviors, not kings you exist to uplift. They are supposed to stand in front of you and solve the problems that matter, not sit in rooms watching you shout, then come out during election season to beg for your vote on broken roads they had years to fix. Build the today, not the promise of tomorrow. The today that you can touch, measure, and hold someone accountable for right now. So here is where I land. I genuinely hope the Cockroach Janta Party becomes everything it says it is if it gets real and not forgotten like the rest. I hope Abhijit never gets comfortable. I hope the people who signed up stay Not because the next insult arrives, but because they chose to stay through the boring, difficult, unglamorous work of actual change. But hope without discipline is just a more comfortable version of giving up. Remember, a party asking other leaders questions online instead of acting like a political party is no different from influencers. You are not a cockroach. You are not a parasite. You are a citizen of a country that was bled for centuries, rebuilt by ordinary people, and is still, right now, worth fighting for correctly. The difference between fighting correctly and just fighting loudly. One of them changes things. The other just gives the system new content to manage. Only you can decide which one you're actually doing.